Okay guys, welcome to the unit on classical Greece. I'm going to take about 30 minutes of your time. We're going to go through and review all the information to cover this. So I need for you to get ready. My name is Mr. Lee and I am an inclusion teacher at Windsor Forest High School in Savannah, Georgia. And this is my review. And here we go. Here's the crest with Windsor Forest. Windsor Forest High School. Okay, so this is the unit on classical Greece, and these are some pictures of Greece here. So what I need for you to do to get ready for this is to get out your book, get out your notes, turn with me in your book to the first page of the unit, and also I need for you to get out a yellow highlighter to highlight your notes to make sure you've got this information in there. And yes, I need for you to get out some paper because you may not have everything down in your notes. Okay, so make sure you got your book, make sure you got paper, make sure you got a highlighter. I need for you to put on your thinking caps and let's go study some world history. The unit we're on is classical Greece, and I wanted to show you a couple of pictures of what the people looked like. Here's another, kind of like what the ladies wore, and this is what a group of people looked like. Okay, so again, this is classical Greece. Now I'm going to follow along in your textbooks if you have the desire. We're going to start on page 119. This starts a new unit, New Directions in Government and Society. We're going to go from 2000 BC to AD 700. But the first chapter, like I said, is going to be Ancient Greece. We start on Unit 1, which is on page 123. The title of this unit is The Cultures of the Mountains and the Seas. The key idea here is that the shape of the land caused separate groups of Greek-speaking peoples to develop societies in isolation from one another. And you can see here on this slide that Greece is surrounded by water, and it also has a lot of mountains. This is a topographic map, and it shows quite a bit of stuff there, doesn't it? Okay. Now, the lives of the ancient Greeks were shaped by the geography of their land. We covered this in class. Greece is a rocky land with high mountains and very deep valleys. It was difficult to move over this land. So Greeks living in different areas could not easily be united. I think we talked about that at length also. So because of that, good farmland covered only a small part of Greece, and Greece could not support many people. The Greeks had easy access to the sea, however. They became excellent sailors, and trade became important. The climate is mild, which allowed Greek men to spend much time outdoors. They attended public events and were active in civic life. The first culture to arise in Greece was that of the Mycenaeans. And you can see here on this map, kind of in that circle area, that's going to be the area that we're talking about, where people first began to live. The Mycenaeans are going to be pretty much all the different green areas and the yellow areas within the map. The Mycenaeans were among the Indo-Europeans who invaded many areas around 2000 BC. The Mycenaeans were ruled by powerful warrior kings in their main city, Mycenae. And you can see that on the middle of the map if you take a look there. Other rulers lived in palace forts in other cities. The Mycenaeans came in contact with Minoan culture of Crete. If you look on the map, it's the pink area down towards the bottom, the island of Crete. They adopted many parts of this culture, including the form of writing and some religious beliefs. Because of this contact, the Mycenaeans also became interested in trade. And you remember why they did that? Because they couldn't grow a lot of crops, and they had to get other things that they couldn't make. Okay. According to ancient legend, the Mycenaeans had also had a long war with the people of Troy. And this is where we talk about the Trojan War. Remember the famous Trojan horse, a gigantic wooden horse? Okay, here is a kind of a cartoon version of the Trojan horse. You've got probably a better picture of it in your textbook on page 125. You're going to actually be reading the Odyssey in your English classes this year. Let me tell you real quick the story. The Trojan War had taken place. It was 10 years. The Trojans lived in a walled city that the other folks could not get into. This war lasted a long time. You'll hear more about the war later. But basically they couldn't get in, and this war went on for 10 long years. So what did they do? The Minoans ended up building a big old wooden horse, and they stowed soldiers away in it. They were very quiet. And they rolled it up to the front gate, and then they got in their ships and they sailed away. The next morning, the people of Troy came in, got up rather. They saw this incredible horse. They thought, uh-oh, they're gone. We can't see them. It looks like they've got on their ships and left, and they pulled the wooden horse into the city and proceeded to have a great celebration. They drank, they ate, they danced, and they got really tired, and so they went to sleep. And then that night, actually, they hadn't left. They had gotten in their ships and sailed around the point. But that night, they sailed back. The soldiers jumped out of the wooden horse. They went and opened the gates, and all of a sudden the other soldiers came in and ransacked the city. And the story of the Odyssey is King Odysseus trying to get back home, and that takes another 10 years. But you'll hear more about that later. Okay? The culture of the Mycenaeans fell about 1200 BC. Sea raiders destroyed their palaces. For the next 400 years, Greece went into decline, a decline so deep that no written records existed from that period. However, through spoken word, Greeks of this time continued to relate epic stories of the earlier age of heroes. One long poem, the Iliad, basically talks about this Trojan War. The Greeks also created a rich set of myths. And here's a picture of some of the Greek gods up on Mount Olympus. And of course, the king of the gods, or the head god, was Zeus. And that's him sitting up there at the top, right? Okay. Many of these Greek legends help to explain the world in terms of actions of the Greek gods. And in other words, if they didn't know how something happened, they said, well, the gods did it. And they had a myth or a story that talked about that. Okay, pretty cool. Okay, the second section in our book, number 2, is titled The Warring City-States. This starts on page 127. Now remember that you had the center of Greek life was the polis, or the city-state. This name was given to the Greek cities and the countryside villages surrounding them. Each city-state was independent. The people who lived in them were fiercely proud of their homes. These city-states had different kinds of government. And this is probably going to be on the test, so make sure that you have this down. Remember, a monarch or a king might rule some. And if you'll remember, a monarch is where a single person ruled the government. Mono, meaning one. Okay? A family of nobles might rule a few. A few wealthy merchants might rule others. Also, the idea of government made up of representatives chosen by the people would also hold some city-states. Now, know that the word aristocracy, a government ruled by a small group of nobles or landowning families. These very rich families often gained political power after serving in the king's military cavalry. And later, as trade expanded, a new class of wealthy merchants and artisans emerged in some cities. When these groups became dissatisfied, then sometimes they took power or shared it with nobility, and they formed an oligarchy, which is a government ruled by a few powerful people. Now remember, aristocracy and oligarchy are very similar, right? Aristocracy, that's going to be a group of nobles, okay, or rich dudes, okay, rich families. An oligarchy is going to be ruled by a few powerful people. They may be military people, okay? They're not, they're rich guys, but they probably become rich later. And remember, the fourth type of ruler is going to be a tyrant. Tyrants generally were not considered harsh and cruel. They kind of got that later, but rather they were looked upon as leaders who would work for the interest of the ordinary people. But of course, like I said, once they got into power, then sometimes they usually became harsh and cruel. And guess what? Somebody might knock them down and take it over. And then also remember, democracy is what we have in this country, and democracy is where it's ruled by the people. Okay? In Athens and other city-states, the wealthy and poor clashed in a contest for power. Athens, however, avoided major political upheaval by introducing reforms. Here's another kind of a picture of Athens to see what it looked like. Like I was saying, Athens, as in other city-states, avoided major political power. And this was all under Pericles. Remember, we talked about Pericles. This is a picture of him. Know what he did and know what happened under him. We'll come back and talk about him a little bit later. Right now, we're going to talk about Solon. Solon was an Athenian leader who came to power in 594 BC. I'm not going to worry about dates. Just know generally when all this stuff all this happened. But Solon removed some of the laws that the poor did not like, such as debit slavery. If you were in debt, you were made a slave. He also opened the assembly where laws were discussed and approved to all Athenian citizens. Some 90 years later, we had another guy that came on the scene, and this is him here. And I'm probably not going to say his name correctly. Celestines. Sorry, guys. Cleisthenes. He also induced further reforms. The most important of these was setting up a council of 500. Okay, 500. This body proposed laws and advised the assembly. Council members were chosen by lot. The reforms under these two guys allowed the Athenian citizens to take part in a limited democracy. And here we go, power to the people. That's basically what democracy means. But citizenship was limited to a small group of Athenians. Unfortunately, only free adult male property owners were considered citizens. Women, foreigners, and slaves were denied citizenship and played no role in Athenian political life. The next city-state we're going to talk about is Sparta. And Sparta is a very strong city-state in the south of Greece. Remember, it's kind of landlocked, and they could actually see people coming. The leaders of Sparta made their city a military state. Boys joined the army at age 7. No, that wasn't a mistake. At age 7, boys joined the army and went through a long period of training as soldiers. Spartan women ran the farms and other businesses, freeing their husbands to serve in the army. A small council of elders suggested laws that had to be approved by a vote of all Spartan citizens. Over the years, the Greeks developed the ability to make iron weapons. Because the cost less than weapons made of bronze, more people could afford them, and soon each city-state had its own army. But I tell you, the best army was the Spartans. The soldiers were from all walks of life, armed with iron weapons and ready to defend their homes at a moment's notice. Now, the Persians were always a threat to Greece. The powerful Persian Empire set its sights on conquering the Greeks. In about 490 BC, again, don't worry about dates, the Persian army landed some 25,000 soldiers off the coast of Greece near the city-state of Athens. At the Battle of Marathon, the Greeks won a tremendous victory that saved Athens. Now, the Persians returned some 10 years later and the Greeks lost a battle on land despite the heroic effects of a small band of Spartans. Now, what happened here, you remember the Battle of Thermopylae. Up here is a mountain pass where 300 mighty Spartans were able to hold the whole Persian army off for 3 days, and that allowed the Greeks to go back and tell Athens that they're coming, but eventually, which was a big deal, but eventually the Persians did overrun Athens, and they burned Athens. But however, the ships of Athens won a great sea battle, and the Spartans followed it with another victory on land, and finally the Persians were beat back. This map shows pretty much how big Persia was at that time. You can see Greece over there on the far left, but it was pretty much a big blow. And this just happens to be a map of the Battle of Marathon, where they all landed there on the shores and came in, and it was kind of a big deal. And remember, Phidippides, ran from the Battle of Marathon back to Athens to tell them of the victory. And remember the word marathon. A marathon race is 26.2 miles, I believe, and that's the distance from the plain of Marathon, where they had the battle, all the way back to Athens. So that's just kind of a fun fact. And this is another kind of a picture or a map, I'd guess, that shows where the Spartans had their last stand here, and you can tell it's very mountainous. They held off a mountain pass. So that's just another fun fact that you need to know. Okay, my friends, now we're going into Unit 3. Unit 3 talks about democracy in Greece's golden age. We're now on page 134. I think it's important that you understand that chart on the bottom, Athenian and United States democracy. I would look at both of them, or both sides there, see what's different, see what's the same. You might even want to do a Venn diagram on that. Gosh, Mr. Lee, are you saying we might have that on the test? Yeah, you very well could. It's important to understand that. Okay, Athens chose Pericles. Remember, we showed a picture of him earlier, Pericles, as its leader, and he served in that role for more than 3 decades. That's 30 years. Decade is 10 years, right? Right. In that time, he took many steps to make Athens better, and he had 3 main goals. Okay, his first goal, he wanted to make Athens more democratic, so he created more positions in government that paid a salary. And guess what? Now poor people could hold those jobs. He wanted to make Athens stronger. The city head of a group of more than 200 Greek city-states called the Deletian League, and Pericles used the League's money to make sure that Athens had the strongest navy in the Mediterranean. He also wanted to make Athens beautiful, and so he used again the Delian League money to fund a grant of building programs in his city. Athens also became home to a group of very skilled playwrights. Plays about the pain and suffering of human life. Sounds like Windsor Forest, doesn't it? Others wrote comedies, which also sounds like Windsor Forest, which often included important ideas. Some plays were critical of Athenians. Proof of that, Athens was a free and open society. And here is a picture of an outdoor Greek theater. And I tell you, I got to see one in Italy. It may have been Roman, but to just see these outdoor theaters is incredible. And here's another picture, kind of a sketch, to see what it looks like. After being rivals for many years, Sparta and Athens finally went to war beginning in 431 BC. And guess what? The conflict ended badly for Athens. In 433, well, because they were going against Sparta. What was Sparta known for? Sparta was known for being soldiers, warriors, right? Athens had all the art and architecture, and Sparta knew how to go to war. The conflict, like I said, the conflict ended pretty badly. And what else happened after that? Guess what? It was a plague. A plague killed a large portion of the Athens people. And here's a picture of the plague, of people dying of the plague. We're going to see the plague over and over again in world history. So this is our first taste of it. After several battles, the war dragged on until Athens finally gave up and it lost its empire. In time for uncertainty after Athens' death, many great philosophers appeared. And they tried to understand human life. The first one we're going to talk about is Socrates. Socrates believed deeply in truth and justice, but many people did not trust him. He was convicted of treason and forced to drink poison. And his pupil is Aristotle. And Aristotle wrote books that summarized all things known to the Greeks at that time. And he invented a way of thinking logically. Oh my goodness, Mr. Lee, are you serious? I am serious as a heart attack. His work was very influential for many centuries. And I have to tell you, actually, if you have to ask me, I will tell you Aristotle is probably one of my favorite philosophers. So that might be on the test too. What is Mr. Lee's favorite philosopher? That is Aristotle. Okay, boys and girls. I'm kidding. I know you're men and women. Right now, we're actually going to go into the fourth unit. I'm sorry, the fourth section, and that's on page 142. We haven't covered this in class yet, so this is going to be a treat for you. Or when I tape this, we haven't gone over it in class. Alexander's Empire. Alexander the Great. Really cool dude. North of Greece was a kingdom of Macedonia. The Greeks looked down on the people there because they lacked the great Greek culture. The Macedonians were tough fighters. They sound a lot like Spartans, don't they? But they are different. They were tough fighters, and they had a strong king called King Philip II. That's on Mr. Lee's word wall. He decided to use his army to invade Greece. The Greek city-states united too late to save themselves. The Macedonians won. And Greek independence was now over. Philip did not enjoy his victory for long, though. He died just 2 years later. And you know what? What, Mr. Lee? Well, I'll tell you what. His son, named Alexander, became king at age 20. Actually, I thought he was much younger than I thought. Really, he was 14, but this book says age 20. Alexander was a brilliant general, and just like his father, he had been taught well, and he was prepared to carry out his father's dream of conquering the Persian Empire. Guess who Philip's teacher was? Did you say Aristotle? You are correct. Remember Mr. Lee's favorite philosopher? See how it all kind of comes back? Well, that's right. His teacher was Aristotle. So he really had a brilliant mind. He studied hard. He learned science. He learned math. He learned art. And because of that, he had some very stunning victories. And then after he conquered, he went on south to enter Egypt, and he was crowned Pharaoh. That was an honorary title, Pharaoh, and founded a city he named for himself, Alexandria. And here is a picture of him in battle. He turned back to Persia and then won another great battle, which ended all of the Persian resistance. And guess what? So now, when you win a battle over somebody, you actually rule them. And so now he had his own empire, which consisted of Greece and now all of the Persian Empire. The young king pushed east. And he also, whoops, this is him dying. That slide is out of order. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you can see here is his empire. It's pretty large. It goes from Macedonia down to Egypt, all the way over to India. He moved deeper into India. However, after many years of marching and fighting, the soldiers wanted to return home, and Alexander agreed. So here's another picture of his kingdom. And they turned around and came back, and on the way back, he began to make plans for how to govern his new empire. But this is when he fell ill. That was a picture I showed you before. And he died. But Alexander's empire was not long lasting, but it had some very important effects. Basically what he did, he split up his empire into 4 parts, and each one of his generals got a part of it. And after Alexander, the people of Greece and Persia and all the lands in between mixed together, and they shared ideas and culture. This is a picture of the very famous lighthouse at Alexandria, named after who? That's right, Alexander the Great. There's another rendition of it. We really don't know what it looked like because we didn't have cameras back then, but this is what artists believed it looked like. And up here at the top, you can see Alexandria, where it was named. But this is what I want to talk about now, is the spread of the Hellenistic culture. You mean, Mr. Lee, we have gone to the 5th section? Yes, my sweet dear students, we have. We're on page 146, and we're talking about the Hellenistic culture. Now, what happened, guys, this is really a mix of all of the different styles in Persia, in Greece, in Egypt, and part of India. Because remember, that was all of Alexander's areas that he'd conquered. And so this new culture arose, the Hellenistic culture. It blended Greek and Egyptian, Persian, and Indian influences, like I just said. The center of this culture was Alexandria, Egypt. And here's another picture of some of what Alexandria, Egypt looked like. This is a kind of a photograph or a rendering, sorry, not a photograph, a rendering of what the Great Library looked like. It was located on the delta of the Nile River on the Mediterranean. It had a large ship harbor. Trade was very lively. And again, this is kind of what, this is actually the burning of the library. Let me get another slide up here. How about this? This shows you the delta and where Alexandria, Egypt was. Again, it had a very large population from a lot of different countries. Think of this as kind of the New York, the melting pot of the ancient world. Alexandria was also a beautiful city. It had a huge lighthouse. We've already seen a picture of that. That over the harbor to show a light to incoming ships. Its famous museum had rooms with works of art. It had the first zoo and a garden. It had a magnificent library that held 500,000 scrolls of papyrus. Now, the way this library was kind of funded, or how it got its collection, here's a picture of what we think it kind of looks like, was that everywhere where Alexander conquered, he would bring books back. And remember that Alexander was kind of called the Great because when he conquered a land, he didn't force people to take up his own religion. So it was kind of a big deal. Let's see. Where am I in my script? The soldiers kept alive what was known about science. The scholars kept alive what was known about science. And some even used an observatory to kind of look at the stars. And this is really the beginning of some of the ancient science. We had astronomers who argued that the sun was actually larger than the earth way before Galileo did it in the Middle Ages. You know, we're seeing that over and over again, that there were scientists long before modern day. We also had this guy, Euclid. Euclid started mathematics back then, geometry, algebra. Oh, he's the guy that did algebra? Oh, man. Yeah, he's the one why we had to take algebra in 9th grade. Sorry about that. But anyway, the thinkers in Alexandria also made advances in mathematics. Euclid wrote a book with basic ideas of geometry. His approach is still used today. Archimedes was another important scientist. Here we go. Who Where am I in my script? He invented many clever machines, including the Archimedes screw, which could be used to bring water from a lower level to a higher one. It was used to bring water to fields being farmed. We had two new schools of philosophy arrive, the Stoics. Actually, this is a picture of the Stoics. And they argued that people should live in a moral life to keep them in harmony with natural laws. Desire, power, and wealth, they thought, could hurt a person's moral well-being. The Epicureans said that people could rely only on what they learned from their five senses. And they urged everyone to live moral lives too. So it was very moral back then. Okay. Now, one thing, arts flourished in the Hellenistic age as well, but the art was very different. Sculpture in particular had several notable achievements. The sculpture at this time differed from that of the earlier Greek style. And this is earlier Greek style, and we're going back to what we've got with the Hellenistic style is that it was very, the figures were more realistic. Remember, the Greeks wanted to have stuff an idealized area of what they thought stuff should look like. Okay? Okay, this is a blank slide. I don't know why it's in there, but we'll keep going. Just some fun facts that will probably be on the test. Remember, we talked about the phalanx, which was the way the Spartans went into battle. It was the way where they could basically conquer people very easily. This might be on the test. This is another picture of kind of what they look like in formation. And here's another picture of the formation. Remember, I always say it kind of looked like a turtle. Here's a good example where they've got their shields in front of them and on top of them, and that would be a formation that would be very tough to penetrate. Okay, everybody see that? Great. Okay guys, here's just kind of some ideas to think about as you're studying for the test. If I were you, I would definitely look at let me pull it up here. I would definitely look at the causes and the effects of the Hellenistic culture. Know what that is. We talked at length about it here in this review. So definitely look at that. Okay? Yes, this is Sparta. Okay, I would definitely, if I were you, look at Sparta. Know what Sparta was, know where it was. You need to know what the Spartan society was and how did it differ from Athens. I think you've already done this in class, but you need to contrast their values, their government, and definitely their lifestyles, okay? You got to know what Sparta is. Guys, you definitely need to know what caused the Golden Age to happen in Athens. You know, we talked about art, we talked about architecture, and we talked about drama. You definitely need to know something about the Golden Age in Athens, okay? These are just some slides to kind of help you think about it, okay? Think about the Golden Age in Athens. You might want to be writing an essay about this. You need to know about the Persian and the Peloponnesian Wars. What was it? How did it affect Athens and Greece in general? Something that had a big effect, so you definitely need to know that. Also, if I were you, I would know the philosophers and the three that we studied. And can you name them? There was Socrates, there was Plato, and there was Mr. Lee's favorite. Can you name it? If you said Aristotle, you are correct. Okay guys, get ready for this test. I've enjoyed studying with you. And that is it. Thanks.